Dear students of Psycholinguistics at the IUG, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As I told you in my message, today's class is about production, the third chapter of psycholinguistics material. Our previous class, we ended the acquisition chapter, and we talked about the birth of grammar, neatness, childish creativity, and the stages of linguistic development. If you have any question before starting our new lecture, don't hesitate to ask. Please feel free to ask about anything you don't understand. Any question? Okay, let's move on. So today's class is about production, language production. It covers the pages from 26 to 40 in Scobell's textbook. We are going to talk about production of language as viewed by Levitt, which is now called the model of language production. We are going to talk about the first two stages or processes of this model, so conceptualization and formulation. Formulation would include priming and slips of the tongue. The title of the chapter is Production, Putting Words in One's Mouth. Now, our Holy Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا صَدَقَ اللَّهُ الْعَظِيمُ. If you should count the blessings, favors, gifts of Allah, you would not be able to enumerate them. So it's not easy to enumerate the gifts we have had from Allah. There are so many gifts or favors that we have, and sometimes we take them for granted. If you look at yourself in the mirror, you can see that you have so many things: hand, nose, mouth, ears, eyes, and each of these gifts is used to do different activities, everyday activities. So you get dressed when you use hands, or you eat using hands, you write using hands. So just the hands. Think of how many things or how many activities you do using your hands, or using your eyes, or using your ears, so on, or legs and so on. It's not easy to enumerate the gifts or blessings we have had. But unfortunately, we fail sometimes to appreciate the value of each of these gifts, unless we have a disability or an injury. So think of spraining your ankle, for example. لويت كده رجلك كده ولا رجلك. So you have now a temporary disability or injury. So now, instead of being able to walk or run or move quickly, you need now to be careful, and sometimes you need to support yourself with a cane or a walking stick in order to just walk slowly. So when we lose a gift, we start thinking of the value of this gift. So it is only through this ability that our marvelous ability is made manifest, as our material says. So the marvelous ability of walking or running is made clear just when we have a problem or disability or an injury. Look at this picture. It's of a young man. In fact, he is Ahmed, my eldest son, when he was in Tawjihi. This was in 2006, 14 years ago. He was riding one day, he was riding his bicycle, and unfortunately he fell off the bike and he broke both arms. And he had to have his arms in cast for 45 days. Think of the difficulties Ahmed had. So it's not easy to have arms in cast for 45 days, not being able to eat, not being able to use the hands to write or to use the computer or to do homework. So there's so many activities that we do. But alhamdulillah, he recovered and he succeeded in his tawjih and joined the university, and now he's in Turkey doing his master's degree, inshallah. If we talk about language production, again, we have so many gifts underlying the production of language. We have organs of speech, and you can see the vocal folds on the right. And you have the brain, which sends messages to the parts or the organs of speech to function, to do their jobs or tasks in order to produce language. Imagine that we have now no vocal folds or no teeth, or a problem with, let's say, the tongue and so on. These abilities are so marvelous that it's not easy to lose the gifts. Or it's only through loss or injury that we suddenly realize how much we take these gifts for granted. وكأنه أمور مسلم بها. We don't recognize their value unless we have disability or an injury, or whether it is now temporary or permanent disability. Let's move to Lebel's model of language production. Lebel is a Dutch psycholinguist, and he viewed language production as a sequential process, a linear process, a step-by-step process made up of four stages, four successive stages, starting with conceptualization, formulation, articulation, and ending with self-monitoring. These are technical terms that we need to discuss in some details in this lecture and in our next class, inshallah, maybe on Saturday. Conceptualization. Now, to have this concept of language production, so we need to make a decision if we want now to express yourself, to convey an idea or a message. Let's say you want to thank someone or to greet someone or to apologize to someone. So you decide in your head, you make the decision to express this idea. This stage is called conceptualization, just making the decision. To express an idea. Now, when you come to formulation, you choose words and the phrases, and still it is something mentalistic. It's something that how it happens in your head. You start choosing the words and the phrases, clauses, that are necessary to express the idea of, let's say, thanking someone or apologizing to someone. And you know, each idea has its own set of words and phrases to use and express. Then we move to articulation, and articulation means we translate or we use our organs of speech to produce the sound. So the actual sounds are now produced to reflect the mental thing that you have made in your head, making the decision to express an idea and choosing the words necessary for expressing this idea. Now we use the organs of speech to produce the sounds. And self-monitoring, the last stage, is while we produce the sounds of the words, we monitor ourselves. We see whether there is a problem to fix or something to edit. So these are, just in brief, the four stages that make production according to level. And this is just one way to see or to investigate language production. In fact, we have, or literature or research has other models. So this is just one way to investigate language production. So there are other ways, and one of them is thinking of production as a holistic activity. But Leibniz's model is well known and is supported by many scholars in psycholinguistics. Your material in the glossary section gives definitions of these four stages. And if you go to the glossary section, you can read that conceptualization, in the conceptualization stage, the speaker makes the decision, decides to frame an idea into language, to express an idea using language. And then the formulation, we think of words, phrases, clauses that would be needed to express this idea, just to choosing, so to frame the message into words and the phrases and the clauses. And later we produce actual sounds to make the sounds and syllables and words that make up the whole message. So words and the phrases that we have chosen in our head are translated into sounds, actual sounds and syllables, which make the speech that we use, and sometimes the written message. So it's something that is called articulation, to articulate the actual representation. And the self-monitoring involves correction or editing what is problematic or what seems to be not effective, so to make it more effective. Okay, so conceptualization again is to make the decision about how to frame an idea into language. And in fact, it's not an easy task. What is happening in your head when you make this decision? So questions raised in your material are, where does the very beginning of any spoken utterance come from? Another question is, what sparks speech? And spark means cause to start or cause to begin. So these are two questions raised in the material, and our material says that it is not easy to answer such questions. One reason is that we don't have enough information about this stage. And in fact, when we think of these questions, they deal with something abstract, not something physical, not something concrete. So they are difficult to answer. There is no enough information about how language is produced, and these questions deal with something mystic, something abstract, something that is not easy to examine using empirical investigation. So it's a mentalistic process or state. It's an issue of mentalism. But we can say that there is something happening in the head before producing words or sounds or language or the speech. The speech that I am now producing while talking to you via Zoom, for sure, has something before in my head. So we can say that the speech doesn't start from nothing or doesn't start from scratch. So there should be something happening in the head before we start hearing the physical sounds, the actual speech. When we move to formulation, we have again the choice of words and the phrases to make the message or to express the idea. And when we compare conceptualization with formulation, we can say that formulation is easier to think about or to consider or talk about or discuss. So conceptualization is hard to conceptualize, to think of its concept, but formulation is easier or much easier to formulate. Now, a psychologist called Carl Lashley is mentioned in our material. He gave a presentation or an oral address, and he talked about how speakers string or put sounds and words and phrases together in a rapid way and in an accurate way. So he told them about a problem he committed or a mistake he had while typing. So what's the problem with this phrase or rapid writing? Anybody? As you can see, the letter W at the beginning of rapid is not necessary. So we have misspelling. So the problem is with the first word. So rapid doesn't start, the word rapid doesn't start with the W. We just use R. So now Lashley in his oral presentation told the audience that he made this mistake. And he accounted for this mistake by saying that he added the silent, added the letter W while anticipating the second word writing, which has a silent letter W. So in anticipation of the silent letter of the second word, he made this mistake and added W to the beginning of rapid. You can read on your own what the material says about this. So again, it's a misspelling of the word rapid. And people sometimes do this. So you sometimes write and you go back to what you have written and you find that you make a problem. It could be a spelling problem, adding a letter or missing a letter. Sometimes you add a word, but it is not necessary. So again, this is common. After this introduction in his address or presentation, Lashley talked about give the audience this sentence. And by the way, the presentation was oral, so the address speech was oral, and the audience were listening. So rapid writing with his uninjured hand. What do you think? Now, should it be with writing R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G or writing W-R-I-T-I-N-G? So number 1 or number 2? In fact, it is difficult to decide. Some people would say the second one. Now, you are right. It could be the second one, but especially when after the introduction made by Lashley about writing and committing spelling mistakes. But can't we use the word write as a verb? In fact, write can be used in English as a verb. And it seems to be something called the garden path sentence. In literature, it's a technical term. So garden path sentence is a sentence that sometimes you understand it in a way, and then after listening the remaining part or the rest of the sentence, you readjust your comprehension and think of a different meaning. So it's a garden, it's a sentence that starts in a way that you think you know where it's going, but the way it ends completely changes the meaning. So if you think of writing with W-R-I-T-N-G, so you expect the topic to be about literacy, about handwriting, and so on. But let's go back to the verb write, write as a verb. In fact, when you use write as a verb, you mean to correct something that is wrong or something that is not in the normal state. So you fix it or return it to its normal position or normal state. Now, to write with an injured hand is possible. So to fix with an injured hand. So the audience were listening and they thought of writing with W, but when they heard the rest of the sentence, rapid writing with his uninjured hand saved from loss the contents of the capsized canoe. We are going to discuss the meaning of capsized and the meaning of canoe. But again, it's about now a completely different story. So it's not about handwriting using a pen or a pencil and so on. Now the word canoe is a light, narrow, means a light, narrow boat. And you can see the picture of a canoe. And capsized canoe is this boat that is turned over in the water. So back to the sentence, rapid writing with his uninjured hand saved from loss the contents of the capsized canoe. Although at the beginning you thought of writing with W, which seems to be the strong meaning of the phrase, the audience and you, I think, would readjust your comprehension and think of writing the other way. So writing R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G is the plausible use of writing. Now, what happened, this experiment, Lashley used this technique of garden path sentences or garden path convention. So it's like a garden with different paths. And when hearing the first part of the sentence, the audience thought that it was about writing, W-R-I-T-I-N-G. But after listening or hearing the rest of the sentence, they felt or learned that Lashley misled them on purpose, and so meant something different. So they had to retrace their steps and choose another path to understand the sentence in an appropriate ways. So retracing the steps, this is like metaphor, and entering a different path to understand the sentence correctly or appropriately. Now, in this presentation, Lashley demonstrated or discussed different themes of speech production. One of them is priming, which is also a technical term, and the slips of the tongue, which is to be discussed. It's an interesting topic we are going to discuss in this lecture, inshallah. But first, let's talk about priming. The verb prime means prepare for a situation, or to make ready for use. So if you prepare something, if you prime something, you make it ready for action or for use. And when you prime someone, you prepare him or her for a situation. Now, you can read the definition in the glossary section, but let's have this listening task. Now, write could be R-I-G-H-T, write W-R-I-T-E. Now, if you are listening to a topic about street direction, so which would you think of? The word right on the left or the word right on the right? Of course, street direction requires the one with on the right, on the left, R-I-G-H-T. But when we talk about if the task is about or the topic is about literacy, education, learning, and so on, we would think of write the second one, write W-R-I-T-E. So again, in a text about street directions, we are primed to choose the first one. So this text primes our choice. So we choose the first one. But if it is about the importance of literacy, we are primed to think of write the second one. I had an experience in the past. This happened a couple of years ago. While I was going to Khan Yunis to give a lecture of psycholinguistics to the section there, I was on the bus, and the driver was playing the radio, and there was news. At that time, it was very cold. The weather was very cold. And the reader of the news was talking about the hunger strike by prisoners in the Israeli jails, Palestinian prisoners. He talked about the difficulty they faced. And then in Arabic he said, وخاصة في هذا الجو القارس جدا الذي. Now think of the word after الذي. Should it be يجتاح or يحتاج? I think we need more context to decide. But Some people might say the strong meaning is يجتاح, because now we talk about الجو القارس, and we can end the sentence saying الذي يجتاح, maybe منطقة الشرق الأوسط and so on. But interestingly, the newsreader said وخاصة في هذا الجو القارس جدا الذي يحتاج فيه المرء إلى مزيد من السعرات الحرارية. A completely different ending. So it's like, again, garden path sentence, we are primed differently depending on so the context. Slips of the tongue. Second topic under formulation. And it's a huge topic. It's an interesting topic, and I'd like you to pay attention. I told you about that. In fact, I want you to observe how people use language, especially children. Now, slips of the tongue are mistakes, but these mistakes are unintentional. And this is something common, something that people do every day. To make a mistake unintentionally. And this mistake is sometimes in speech and sometimes in writing. Now, when it is in writing, we sometimes call it the slip of the pen or slip of the keyboard. And this is again common. And it's interesting to study slips of the tongue because it helps us to know about this stage of formulation, what we choose in our head. We have decided to express an idea, and we have chosen words and phrases in our head, and then unfortunately something else pops out. So we intend to say something, and something else is produced, interestingly. And our material compares between slips of the tongue on one hand, and the stammering and aphasia on the other. Slips of the tongue are very common. They pervade our speaking and our writing. The stammering and aphasia, which we are going to discuss inshallah in chapter 5, are less common. So people, maybe all people, make slips of the tongue. So they, you and I and others, so make, so sometimes you intend to say something, you want to say something, and so unfortunately you say something. So they are interesting to study because we, again, think of something we have chosen, so we expect to produce, but this unintentional mistake freezes the production process momentarily and catches the linguistic mechanism in one instance of production. So it's insightful, it's interesting, and it helps us to know, to talk about what happens in our head. Let's see in a minute some examples. So sometimes the production, something that we produce, the slip of the tongue, is something without meaning. Sometimes it has a humorous meaning, and we sometimes laugh. When we hear this slip of the tongue, we are coming to this humorous or funny part. Irrespective of the meaning of the slip of the tongue, still we can tell that they are made within patterns. And we can say that they are within boundaries or within a framework. So we can say that they happen at predictable points, at predictable patterns, not haphazardly or not everywhere. So there are certain points and certain patterns and certain framework to bind such mistakes. So they don't pop out anywhere. We have slips of the tongue at predictable points, and they follow certain patterns. Let's see. So in your material, there are 10 examples of slips of the tongue, divided into 3 sections or 3 parts. 1 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 10. Now the utterances on the left are the intended utterances or parts. And the ones on the right involve slips of the tongue. So again, in your material, we have some examples of slips of the tongue. And as we define slips of the tongue, they are mistakes that are made unintentionally. So people unintentionally make such mistakes. They formulate some phrases in their heads to use, but sometimes something else pops out. And as we learned, these slips of the tongue are not random, so they don't pop out or happen anywhere in the stream of, let's say, the utterance or the speech. There are predictable points, and these slips of the tongue follow predictable patterns. Let's discuss the first 4 examples. In fact, we are going to discuss the first 4 examples, and I would leave the other parts, 5 to 10, for you to read on your own. So they are not difficult to follow in the material. But let's see the first section. Now, the first item has an intended utterance, a reading list, and the speaker said a leading list. Now, what happens here? We have the ra sound changed into la sound. Unintentionally, again, unintentional mistake. It's not now something that is produced by someone who has no ra in his inventory of phonemes. مش بيقرط بالراء, so having ra, but unfortunately saying la. So again, ra, a reading list, la, a leading list. Now we said that a slip of the tongue like this is not random, so happening within a framework, within a boundary, within a pattern, certain structure to follow. And the first 4 examples are related to phonology, so the phonological structure or the phonological framework. So let's discuss this first item. As you learned in the phonology and phonetics course or linguistics course, the ra and la share some features. And you can see the consonant chart in the slide having la and ra as liquids. The la is lateral and the ra is central, but still they are both liquids sharing this manner of articulation. And both are alveolar, so sharing the place of articulation. So it is likely to happen in speech of people to switch ara into a la, but not ara into a sha. So not to say a shedding list or a something else. Why? Because again, we have more features to share when we have random. So it is more common. Now, the second item, big and fat. And by mistake, the speaker said big and fat. How to explain or how to account for this mistake? Again, we have this consonant chart, and we can see that ba and ba under discussion show some features. They are both bilabial, and they are both plosives or stops. Now, changing ba into pa means that we have a voiceless sound. So not vibrating the vocal folds and saying pa instead of ba. Big changed into P. So this is very common. Our material talks about something additional, something semantics. The semantic factor could be considered as an issue. The relationship between the animal pig and the word fat, so as an adjective or as a noun. We have so pig rather than other sounds like big. So big and fat is likely to be changed into big and fat, but not big or wig and so on. So within a boundary, within a framework, within a structure, within a pattern. The third item involves vowels. And as you can see, we have E, which is a front vowel, and O, which is a back vowel. And they are switched, having E in the last word and O in the first word. And instead of having it fill the pool, the speaker unintentionally said full the pill. Again, irrespective of the meaning of the utterance full the pill, whether it has meaning or not, in fact it has, but it is not that meaningful. But again, it happens within a framework or pattern. Switching a vowel or changing a vowel into another vowel, but not changing a vowel into a consonant. It is possible, but again, not very likely. Last item is interesting. It's detail in the material, and it needs more attention. Drop a bomb, change into bomb, a drum. By the way, bomb has a silent letter B, قنبلة, bomb. The speaker said a drum with again a silent B, but what's the meaning of a drum? In fact, drum is not an English word, but it could be produced. But again, producing a slip of the tongue, as we learned, happens or involves a patterning or framework or boundaries. Let's leave this for a while and think of syllabification in English. Now, English has different syllables, different patterns of syllables. One of them is having two consonants at the beginning of the syllable. Now, we can have da sound plus ra sound as two consonants at the beginning of a syllable. And you can think of words or syllables including these two sounds. So dra is possible in English as a syllable. So we have drink, we have dream, we have a drop, we have dry, etc. But what about sra? Sa is a consonant and ra is a consonant. But is this a possible cluster in English? To have a syllable beginning with stra, s and r. In fact, English doesn't allow this combination of cluster or sound. So to have stra is not permissible in English. And of course, you will not be able to give a word or a syllable that has these two sounds as a cluster. So it's not permissible or allowed. What about sa and ta, sta? So to have sa and ra is not possible, but sa and ta is permissible. So we have stick, we have stop, we have stay, we have stand, and so on. Now, what about having ta, da, and ta? It's not permissible. So back to the example of the slip of the tongue in number 4, you can find that although drum is not an English word, this last word in the slip of the tongue, although it's not as an English word, it is produced or was produced within a boundary, within what is allowed or what is permitted in English. English allows this combination of the sounds, da and dra. But the ta is not permitted. So again, regardless of the meaning of the slip of the tongue, whether we have meaning or not, what is produced unintentionally is rule governed, is controlled by the rules of the land, is controlled by the framework of the pattern or the structure. And this is again discussed in your material. It's detailed. So not all consonants can go together. So not in English or any other language, in Arabic, so and so on. For example, in Arabic, standard Arabic, we don't have this combination at the beginning of a word, so two consonants. And those who produce standard Arabic and then make slips of the tongue, of course, wouldn't break this rule. So wouldn't make slips of the tongue that don't follow the pattern, the phonological pattern or later morphological pattern to discuss something. Again, so we can't just put any two consonants together in English or in any other language. And the details we discussed in the previous slide is, so drum is not an English word, but still it is a slip of the tongue within the framework, within the pattern, within what is allowed in English. So follow the sound patterns of English. As I told you, you need to read the examples 5 to 10 and see how the unintentional mistakes or slips of the tongue are produced within patterns. So 5 to 8 involve morphology, and 9 to 10 involve syntax plus morphology, maybe morphosyntax. I recommend you read this on your own, and I think you can get something useful. But as I said before, you need to observe how people use the language. I sometimes take notes of what I hear, whether a child's utterance or an adult's utterance, whether it is a slip of the tongue or something creative. You remember the Shufini fil Manjar I told you about in our previous lecture, a creative utterance by Ahmed. And of course, you have other experiences of the creativity. And I think you have had slips of the tongue, either heard or you yourself produced. I once was listening to the news and heard someone saying اسمح لي, instead of saying اسمح لي يا فخامة الرئيس, he said اسمح لي يا فخامة الرخيص, changing خا and changing the hamza, the glottal stop, into kha, understand, to sa. So this is a slip of the tongue. And those who make slips of the tongue almost always correct themselves. So اسمح لي يا فخامة الرئيس, آسف يا فخامة الرئيس, could something like this. Let's have a video of a slip of the tongue I found for you.
حوارا وطنيا انخرطت فيه كل الأطراف السياسية.
You can hear حمار حوار, and this is again a slip of the tongue, and the speaker corrected himself. حوار حوار.
إن شاء الله ما يكونش حماري.
Another nice example of slips of the tongue, which is in literature called Spoonerism, after this guy called William Spooner, the head of the new college. He made several mistakes involving switching sounds, initial sounds of two words. So once he was talking to a group of Welsh miners, عمال مناجم, and he said to them, "You noble tons of soil," instead of saying, "You noble sons of toil." He wanted to praise them. And يا أبناء المشقة والتعب. Toil means hard and unpleasant work. Unfortunately, he made this slip of the tongue, switching the initial sounds of tongue and sun and soil and toil. This is called Spoonerism. Spoonerism is a special kind of slips of the tongue. So it can be considered as a slip of the tongue. And it is defined in your material as, so spoonerisms are slips of the tongue, which create new phrases with often humorous meanings. I recommend you start figuring out how people formulate their utterances and then produce something different involving the slips of the tongue. In fact, it is interesting. One important point about slips of the tongue, by those who make them, they are almost always corrected. People who make slips of the tongue almost always correct themselves, which is something different from errors by learners of a language. Those who learn a language sometimes make this the problem or the error, and they don't know how to fix it. So it is not something that is made unintentionally. This is all what they know. But those who make slips of the tongue almost always correct themselves. The حمار حوار, رئيس رخيص رئيس, and tons of soil, sons of toil, and so on. So those who make slips of the tongue normally almost always correct themselves. Dear students, I think this is enough about our class today. I wish you the best safety and the best health. Assalamu alaikum.
السلام.